Our returning guest is founder and CEO of Badger Maps. You probably know that by now since last week's introduction. And Badger Maps is the number one route planning system for field sales reps. And this man founded and created this whole concept. After receiving his MBA at Stanford, Steve joined Google, where he became Google Enterprise's top sales rep executive globally, actually, in 2009. In 2012, he founded Badger Maps to help field sales people be more successful with multi-stop route planning. He is host of Outside Sales Talk, a podcast that I've had the privilege of attending on, where he interviews dozens of experts on top sales tips that share their tips. And Steve is also the president of the Sales Hall of Fame, which he shared with us in the last episode. So, Steve, here we go again. Welcome back. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Everold. I'm really excited to be here. Continue this conversation we started last week.
Yes, and the conversation. I mean, I've had so much great feedback from last week's show because, as you know, you bring a certain perspective to sales because you not only are you a former Google world-renowned sales rep, but the founder of Badger Maps, a company based in Silicon Valley or San Fran. So this is a big deal because you bring a totally different perspective to sales than how, let's say I myself being in auto sales or an advertising sales rep or, other people may look at it. So it's always very interesting to get your take on certain things. And tonight we're definitely going to dive into another relevant topic on action sales leaders need to take in a recession. So why don't we, talk right off the bat in a down economy, because we're kind of going through this right now, where most salespeople are, most sales teams or managers are not thinking about recruiting. And I believe that there's definitely a lot of available great sales reps out there right now who might be looking for a job. So what are your thoughts on recruiting in a down economy?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is a great time to recruit great salespeople for your team. The market for hiring great salespeople has been so tough for years, and now it's really. I mean, I haven't seen it this good in a decade easily. There's a lot of really talented salespeople. They've been laid off. They've been furloughed because of the economy right now. And if you have the means, it's a great time to look to invest in hiring them and getting more sales on your team as a result of those investments. One way to think about this, if they'll bring you more money, and it has to be at the margin. It doesn't count if you would have gotten it anyway. But if a new rep will bring in more money than they cost, why wouldn't you hire them? Like the all-in cost, if you can cover that nut. And then they'll bring in that and more. What would stop you? You got to look at how long it takes them to get up to speed. Need to look at how likely they are to succeed. The failure rate, all those things. But when you weigh all those together, I think it can be a great time to double down and get some great talent on your team. Another thing to think about is some reps that might have been very successful on your team in good times won't necessarily be as successful in these times, right? I mean, and that's something that you also do have to think about. That you might need to replace some reps with who are on your team right now with people that would be more successful under these conditions. And, as a sales manager, you probably know who those people are. So what do you need to do to hire great salespeople? You need to be very specific about the criteria, what you're looking for in a candidate and what you need them to do and who you need them to be successful in the sales role at your organization. You need to actually write those criteria down and give those criteria to the person that's actually on the acquisition side, a recruiter, et cetera. You need to qualify the candidates that you're hiring based on their characteristics that they can display, to you during the hiring process. You need to, You need to design the hiring process in a way that it will expose who has those characteristics that are going to be successful in your organization. You need to be specific in your job posting about what it is that you're looking for in terms of hiring someone, so that you make sure that you're attracting the right people to interview in the first place.
Yes.
Don't put things in the job posting that don't need to be there. This is a mistake I see so many people make. They write down, I need someone from a top school, or they write down, I need someone with an MBA, or I need someone with whatever characteristic. If you don't need an MBA to be successful in a role, don't put that as one of the criteria. Don't ask for 7 years experience if that's not something you need, because you can scare off potentially fantastic candidates that would have been really successful in your organization with these types of false requirements. I'd much rather get a ton of applicants for a sales role and give them all some kind of 5-minute sniff test, something that's going to take the hiring manager, or the recruiter 5 minutes to sniff out whether they've got, the basics of what we need or not, then filter out a bunch of people and only have a few applicants, none of whom were really a great fit.
And that's such a great follow-up from last episode that we did on how to lead teams in unprecedented times, about choosing the right people and putting the right people on the bus, which is a quote from Jim Collins' book. So here we are diving a little bit deeper to the roots of how to select the right people, and you may need to replace some people. And to that again about replacing some salespeople right now is there are some that are handling, not to blame anyone, who are overwhelmed, rather, maybe is a better word, by the current circumstances that's going on. Some people, I've seen it firsthand, where some people are more stressed out, because everybody handles it differently, right? Some people are more overwhelmed by the circumstances right now, and some people handle it much better. So putting the right people on the bus, especially in a time of crisis, or where there may be a recession, or maybe there's a looming recession, can make all the difference in the world, based on what you're saying. So as we talk about the recruiting process, Steve, what does a solid recruiting process look like in a down economy?
Great question. I think sales leaders need to rethink what their reps need in terms of characteristics and training, et cetera, to be successful in this economy. And they have to then adjust their recruiting process to make sure they're bringing in that new rep. So, if you're if you're still recruiting right now, you're still looking to build the team. That means marketing the role correctly and acquiring applicants, leads, and in the way I look at it, to make sure that they meet the specifications that you need to be successful in the role. So, you need a great job posting that clearly identifies what applicants need to have, not one that just describes the company and why it's so great to work there, like you see on a lot of job applications. I think that's a wasted opportunity. You want the right people to apply, and you want to scare the wrong people off with your job application. An applicant tracking system can be really helpful to keep everything straight. There's a ton of applicant tracking systems in the market. We just actually switched from one to another on our HR team, but these are really helpful if nothing else, if you're a really small organization, just keeping track of it in a shared Google Doc is fine, but you need to really be organized and keep track of things.
Should companies rush, even though they may feel stressed about the current time, and they're going through all these applicants, and whether they have a lot of applications or not, because if they have a lot of applications, they should say, well, maybe we should take all the best ones we can get, or as fast as we are getting them. Or if they're not getting a lot of applications, they could rush and pick the wrong ones because maybe there's not enough to choose from. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that's happened a ton lately. And I think the sales cycle, quote unquote, on hiring new reps is going to look very different now than it did for the past decade. And so you do have to kind of change your perspective as a hiring manager on that. It's been a situation where you did have to rush. If you got, someone with a pulse that seemed like they could do the job, you needed to move fast to hire them with the right package that was competitive to bring them in, because it was such a tough market to get people that were great. I don't think that's the case now. So I think you don't need to rush. I think you want to be timely. You want an HR process, a recruiting process where you get the word out well for a month, collect your applications, and throughout that period of time, you can be putting people through the process. But I don't think that people need to feel like there's a gun to their head the way maybe it's felt for the last little while.
Yeah, and that's because I see that as a common mistakes companies make, because they focus on replacing the body, so to speak, to get revenue, but maybe that's not the right person, and then they have to go through, the person leaves or a better opportunity comes by, they're not the right fit, whatever reason there might be, and then they have to go through the whole process again.
Absolutely. Well, I think that a good process can help keep you from doing that. So if you, as a part of your hiring process, have challenges or tests that really allow the candidate to prove that they have the characteristics and abilities the team needs right now, it really makes the hiring decision a lot easier. And it allows you to compare their actual performance in a non-biased, scorable way against the other applicants. It takes away as much, going with your gut, and makes it much more about the numbers and much more, because you can score their actual activity. So, have them overcome an objection, have them pitch something, have them, negotiate with you. Whatever skills that you identify are really important for a sales rep to succeed in your organization, make sure as a part of the sales application or, onboard the sales recruiting process, you're identifying if they have those skills or they don't. And, I guess if you're looking for places to be faster, have the offer worked out before it comes time to give the offers out, right? So don't have the legals and like the details and the operational side that you could have worked out up front. Don't have that hold up the process. Don't have that extend things. And then also finally, have a great onboarding process, because that's another place that I see people waste time here. If you've invested in a solid onboarding process, and these onboarding processes do need to be rethought out now, because you might have been able to get away with not having the best onboarding processes in place if a rep was kind of able to learn by osmosis from the other reps hanging around the office. Now that everyone's remote, you need a lot more process around that. You have to rethink that and make sure you're able to communicate knowledge and get your new reps up to speed. I think that's another area that can be rethought through on the recruiting process right now.
Do you think in this interviewing process or in this recruiting process, a good question or a good test would be the candidate themselves, probing or information about the company? I mean, if they come in and it's kind of a one-sided conversation where they're looking for a job and they're looking for employment, even though they may have the qualifications, Steve, do you think it's important for candidates to study the company that they're applying with, right? And have some questions and be ready?
I think that is if someone doesn't know the blocking and tackling about your organization and doesn't know the basics, it's a real bad sign they haven't done their homework. And it's a good sign that especially for sales reps, more true than with, maybe an engineer or something, but or a lot of roles, really. I mean, a salesperson, you need them to know that they have to do their homework and research on a customer before they sell them. And getting a job is a sales process effectively. So if they're not able to answer the basic questions about you, and what the company is, what the product does, if they haven't done their homework, that's a real bad sign. I mean, I've seen companies ask some pretty specific questions and use them as almost like a cut question here. And I don't think that's necessarily appropriate either. I mean, I don't just want to hire the person who had the most time to memorize and learn everything about the company. But I think it is going through an interviewing process and a courting process of this nature with a new employee. You get a lot of signals, and I think that's one signal. I try not to put all the weight on any one thing, but that's certainly a good signal.
Absolutely. So impact. So you have a lot of experience in field sales. I mean, in fact, you founded the company Badger Maps as a result, a software company for field salespeople. So they're under a lot of pressure right now, since you can't go out into the field as much to meet clients. So how do we bridge the gap, Steve, of having to face or can't do face-to-face visits, especially when the sales pitch is based on that customer experience of seeing and feeling and touching and hearing the product, and you can't really do that over Zoom. How do you bridge this gap?
Yeah, well, there are some hard stories here right now for sure. There are a lot of products that are really best sold in person, and anything else you do isn't going to work as well. So what do you do now under this new world in which we live? So I think you have to stay productive. You have to keep generating new sales cycles and moving existing sales cycles downfield, even if you probably aren't going to be able to get it over the line because your customer is closed right now. Maybe you sell beer to bars, and you could get someone all the way to the point of, I'm going to get all my kegs through you now. You're a better vendor. The kegs are going to be cheaper, colder, and delivered in a more timely manner, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not going to be able to buy any kegs from you right now because our bar is very, very closed. So you need to keep moving, getting the sales cycles right to the point, right to the tipping point, and then once things open back up, you can knock them all down and win them. I think it's a great time to focus on filling the top of the funnel if you're in this kind of limbo state that a lot of field sales reps find themselves in. The end of the funnel, the closing, it can be really tough, and the middle of the funnel, I think you can only take it so far in a lot of cases. But the beginning of the sales funnel, you can succeed at remotely just as well as you ever could. So do more prospecting, build more lists of prospects, get awareness up in your territory and amongst your prospective buyers. Spend time building relationships with your ideal customers in other ways, like social selling skills. You can sharpen those skills. I mean, and this alone is a topic big enough to write a book about. But
yes,
I've interviewed several people on my podcast who are all different types of experts in social selling, and I've learned some really interesting things from those guys. There are some clever tactics to generate new leads and to deepen existing relationships with existing customers and prospects through social media. I think when you talk to your prospects over Zoom or over the phone, the key is to sell and be productive right now and get sales moving forward. Even, it's frustrating sometimes you're not going to be able to close the same number of deals, or they're not going to close a lower percentage of them. But get on the calls, build the relationships, help those prospects understand how they're going to benefit from your solution, help them see that. And then, when they get to an economic situation where they're going to be able to move forward, they're all teed up and ready to do a deal with you. And, I think it's pretty likely that when things are turning back on for your customers, that's about the same time that reps are going to be able to get back in front of these customers and close the deal in person, because we're all kind of living under the same viral regime here,
So what do you say to the sales reps, though, whether they're inside sales reps or field sales reps, where they have to in some respect, accept that the process right now is longer, going to be longer. They're going to have to do a little bit more grunt work, a little bit more preparation. And yes, they'll close some, a lower percentage, but the process will be longer. And to maintain that relationship, to make the initial contacts, to build a relationship over time. And as you say, when the time is right and they're ready, that they'll benefit from their solution. What do you say to those salespeople that might say, well, oh my goodness, this is a long process, and how am I going to make any money now? Wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are exceptional times, and we need to take exceptional measures to be successful in them. And hey, if you ever wanted an excuse to fail, now we've all got the best excuse in the world. But excuses don't pay mortgages, unfortunately, and the bank's going to keep demanding that mortgage. So, I think what do I tell a rep? I'm telling my reps, let's normally we think about things in terms of months, right? And I think that is I think reps should think about things in terms of months. I think for most companies, I mean, sometimes it's weeks if it's a really high turnover product or whatever, but if you're selling purses in retail or something, obviously it's different. But for most businesses, I think a month is certainly in my industry, software.
Yeah, it is in automotive as well. You live and die by each month, pretty much.
And so I'm telling reps, hey, we've had a couple crappy months. I mean, this past month, June, we the company is back to growing, but we were shrinking in March and April, and a little bit even in May. But, what I'm telling reps is, hey, let's think less about the months and more about the year, and tee up the deals now that we can close in October, November, December, January, because, these months aren't going to look as great, but it doesn't have to impact our year all that much because we're teeing things up now. It's like bowling, but we're not just laying out, 10 pins. We're just laying out 100 pins, and we're going to get to strike it with a ball in, October and November. And so just keep teeing things up. And when the world opens up, we're going to get these deals. So
you must be a bowler, because that's a good analogy.
I haven't played. I got to bowl maybe 6 months ago. I'm not exactly avid at it. But,
no.
Nor, I think that's one of the things that's closed right now. But
yeah, that's funny. So, what trends do you see in field sales reps over time in the post-COVID world? If every Zoom sales rep and every company that has a consultant practice around digital transformation, would have you believe that, we're willing to, this is going to be the death of the field sales rep, so to speak. How do you see field sales reps being impacted?
Yeah, no, that's that's so true. Every sales consultancy is like, this is the end of the way you're selling things, and so, but
it's never coming back.
Yeah, the world's never coming back, but don't worry, we'll train you for the way that things are going to happen now, but for a price. I've seen that a lot, but yeah, I mean, in terms of trends, is field sales dead? Absolutely not. I mean, field sales is not going to die. Face-to-face meetings are crucial for a lot of different products and a lot of types of sales. It shortens sales cycles. It deepens relationships. It will always be important. It's really hard to replicate the connection that's made with customers in person through Zoom. Through Zoom or over the phone, you just don't get that, right? You can't look someone in the eye, and interactions over the internet are clunky and awkward. In-person meetings, salespeople, they have the opportunity to connect and really understand a customer, understand their problems, and people thrive off of social interactions. In person, you can tap into real connections and create real life.
Yeah, they spill the guts more with you in person, I think.
Absolutely. It's hard to trust someone.
I can't believe I have somebody else on the show with me talking about, face-to-face interactions and sales actually still matter. That's
I'm a big believer in that.
As am I, right? Because like you're on social media, right? You meet someone on LinkedIn or you meet someone on Facebook and they'll carry on that texting conversation forever and ever. And I'm like, okay, enough of this already. Like, it's taking longer to type the damn message than to make the phone call.
Yeah.
Right?
And just like phone calls are better than, IMing back and forth or texting back and forth. Face-to-face meetings are better than phone calls. It's just, you can, if you're in the room with someone, you can see their objections, you can see their body language, you can gauge how they truly feel in a way.
If you're making a genuine connection with them or not, you'll kind of know.
Yeah.
Right.
And sales cycles shorten by being able to get the right people in the room and hash out what's going on, what the objections are, what's interesting, what's important. You can only do that. It's really hard to do that in a way that's not face to face. And, there are a lot of reasons that when all you can do is talk on the phone or use Zoom, sales cycles extend, they get longer. Mm-hmm. But once again, the good news is, as soon as your team can get out there and get in front of people again,
so what I'm hearing from you, Steve, is right now, these Zoom calls, these social interactions, these, emails, follow-up, Zooms, messaging, it matters right now because we pretty much have not much choice, right? Mm-hmm. We have no choice in that. But don't give up. Don't stop. It may be tedious one day. It may be easier the next day. But essentially what you're doing is building probably the most valuable funnel that you could build for the entire year. Because when things start to open up, these you'll start to knock them down with your bowling pin analogy, right? Mm-hmm. You have 100 lined up versus 10. You might be able to knock down 35 and close 35% or 40. And I've seen this happen in the automotive space that I spend my days, because we were closed end of March, all of April, and first week or two of May. And when we went back, so during that time being off, we still fielded the chat leads and the phone calls and the emails. Couldn't meet anybody, couldn't deliver a car, couldn't really see anybody. But so we were being told not to, right, by law. But these people were still calling and we were still returning calls. And we opened in 2.5 weeks in May. We pretty much did a record. For us, I think we delivered 82 cars or something in 2.5 weeks, which was a good number for 2.5 weeks after being closed. And then June, we just finished with, I think, 127, which was a record June for us, for our size store. I mean, in the United States, I know that's peanuts. That's like a week. But if we weren't working on those leads throughout the last 3-4 months and managing those inquiries, and there are some clients we spoke to 6-7 times, right?
Sure.
And
that sales cycle is harder and longer remotely than it is when you can get them to show up in the showroom. But you're walking, you can grind through it. You can tee it up. Maybe they still needed to come do a test drive, but a lot of the other stuff was teed up.
Yeah, exactly. So when the time came, when we were able to open, we literally got flooded. We literally had to manage the traffic strictly by appointments because we couldn't have people in the showroom all the time touching all the cars, right? They were all locked. So we had to manage that. But you're right, as in we kind of teed it up and we still engaged. We still sent out quotes, knowing that when the time came, whether that's in the fall for the rest of the US or Canada, the economies, we just need to continue to tee it up. So that's an amazing point. So with that said, let's now talk about communication, because this drives me crazy. I just literally did a whole panel on automotive dealership culture, which is kind of turning some heads because I guess I touched a nerve. And largely that comes down to communication, Steve. So communication is so important, especially in a crisis. And so what are some thoughts you have around how sales leaders need to change their communication in these times?
Yeah. Well, people's imaginations can get the best of them. And so communication is so important, particularly within large groups. The gossip of impending doom in these times is powerful, and it travels quickly, and it can lead to rash decisions by employees and morale problems. And I think sales leaders need to communicate with their teams in a transparent and realistic and optimistic way. They need to give them an action plan that puts their fears to rest and lets them focus on the selling. And people want safety, people want security, and as a business leader, you're responsible for their security, the base layer of their pyramid of needs. Money to pay for food, housing. You're responsible for their health care, at least in America. You're ultimately responsible for their long-term financial security, right? And things higher up the pyramid too, enjoyment of life and the wants as opposed to the needs. So I think one of your key responsibilities, because you have all this power, is to communicate with them clearly and truthfully about where things are at so that they can plan accordingly. If from a productivity perspective, if you don't communicate clearly and truthfully, then your reps can spend all their time worrying about the worst
and gossiping between each other about it.
Absolutely.
And,
so you gotta, as a sales leader, you've got to tell people what is the immediate term plan, what is the midterm plan, what is the long term plan, and how do they change given these different factors. If it's a small recession, this is what it's going to look like. If it's a prolonged recession, we're going to have to take these steps. You need to make them feel comfortable so that they know what to expect and they can stay focused. I would recommend over communicating in these times, not under communicating. Have daily huddles with your team at the same time every day with the sales team. Bring the team together, even though they're apart right now. Like, you have to kind of keep everybody on the same page and leverage the relationships that exist among them to support each other through these. The sands are often shifting around us right now. You have to keep them focused on what's important, the key performance indicators and help everyone see how everyone else is doing against their key performance indicators. And communicate success stories and help and empower your sales team to communicate the success that they're having with other team members. Like, oh, I figured out, if you have a sales team that's selling beer to bars and they're just getting killed out there because the bars are closed, but then someone figures out, hey, I'm kind of getting on these big apartment buildings mailing lists and we're just delivering beer right to people's apartments. Mm-hmm. Empower your team to share that story with the rest of the team so that they can work on doing that too. But over communicate in these times. If you a lot of teams are doing one huddle a day, but don't be afraid to do two huddles, one at the beginning and one at the end of the day, even just 10 minutes each. But
it doesn't take a long time.
It doesn't take a long time to align people, communicate some key messages, make sure everyone knows what they should be focused on.
So just from this one question, I literally made a whole bunch of notes here because it's a subject that I speak to a lot as far as sales and leadership culture, because that is what drives whether you're productive or whether you get through the tough times or not. And you're talking about putting their fears to rest. And that to me is literally what I've been driving me crazy for the last three months. And especially since we returned for the last 7 weeks, is how does leadership put the sales team and their not just the sales team, but their entire staff, put their fears to rest. And I think this is where a lot of businesses and companies have either risen to the occasion in unprecedented ways or have fallen flat on their faces because of this communication or the communication style, and not being able to put their employees or their teams' fears to rest. You talk about the base layer of pyramid of needs, where I know companies out there that don't care about other people's base, pyramid of needs.
And it's we have a monthly all hands meeting at Badger where we'll get the whole company together, and all the different heads of all the different business units will talk, and I'll talk about everybody will say what's going on in their different units. I'll give the big picture view of the company, and I feel like these communication in these times, those meetings have been really important lately. I mean, we've been dealing with COVID, and so I guess we had a couple months ago we were dealing with that and what's going on and how it's affecting the company and what it's doing to sales and what it's doing to our existing customers and where I see the economy going. And then last month we did the team meeting was all covered updates on that and how things were doing, but also we really took time and went pretty deep to communicate and think about and talk about as a group, Black Lives Matter and what's going on in the world on that front. And now this month we're going to do our big team meeting in a couple of days, and I think the focus is going to be about what actions and what steps we're taking given what's been happening and how things are going, and looking forward for a few months of how we're going to be coming back into the office and how we're going to do that in a way that accommodates people that are vulnerable to disease or live with parents or relatives that are vulnerable to the disease, et cetera. And kind of putting people have concerns and fears about all these things. And it's really important for leadership to communicate, to empathize, to listen, to understand what's going on with people.
So that's doing it at scale individually, because not everybody's, personal lives and home circumstances are the same. Some of us at work don't even know that there's someone elderly in that other person's home, or someone with a disease, be it heart condition, cancer, lung, or just somebody that, or somebody that's maybe disabled or whatnot.
We surveyed the whole company on that, and
really
20%, because I need to know, right? Because it affects our plans for how we're going to go back and when and what precautions we need to take. And about a fifth of our company has the employee either is vulnerable themselves or has a vulnerable person that they are closely in contact with. And for people like that, we have to until there's a vaccine for those vulnerable people, there's not really a way to have them come back safely.
So special cases and special circumstances.
And we have to be able to accommodate those people. And so the HR team's been working hard to think through those issues and figure out how we're going to approach that. And that's
I'm not sure I've heard of any other CEO, and I listen, I read enough and I see what's going on, but I'd be interested to know if there are any other companies or major companies or small companies for that matter that surveyed their employees or their team members to see what their special needs or requirements were, to determine, rather than being told by that employee. I mean, there's a difference, because we're talking about communication here, where the company could say, well, we're reopening on July 1st, and it's the employee or the team member that has to come to management and say, but I can't come back because, right? Then you're starting to find out, and then you're actually ill prepared because you didn't survey the situation ahead of time before you announced an opening.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's hard to do, right? I mean, we built a survey in Google Surveys, but I mean, you could use SurveyMonkey, or there's a dozen tools that you could use for this. But you gotta, it's hard to have the conversation at scale, right? Like I can't sit down with all these people and have a conversation. I mean, I guess we could have individual managers sit down and have a conversation with everybody, but it's almost better to have this clean way of rolling the real information up, not just like notes, but like the perfect, like these were their answers, right? I also wanted to know who was just uncomfortable with the concept of going back to work, right? Like I'm not really here to hold a gun to someone's head. I'd rather that, if they're not vulnerable necessarily, but they're just not comfortable being in the work environment and would prefer to work from home. I want to be able to accommodate that because,
wow. So did you find, Steve, did anything surprise you actually from doing that survey? And folks, we're talking about communication here. This particular question on communication in teams, and this episode 71 is about how action sales leaders need to take in a recession or in times of difficulty. So
for sure, there were things that surprised me there. I'm trying to bring up the results here. I'm trying to remember the highlights that. One thing that I remember was that people felt really productive working from home, and we have 4 offices and we have an open office plan in general. I mean, there's some meeting rooms and some people have private offices, but in general, it's an open office floor plan, and people feel really productive working from home. And people that commute really don't like commuting. And I guess these are things that you would guess or that you would know, but like. The people that, we have people, especially in like the Bay Area, right, where there's traffic's terrible. We have people with like a 2-hour each way commute. Guess what?
Wow.
They don't want to come back to the office. They hate that, right? and so it's like
we know the traffic is bad in San Fran sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's that people really feel good about working from home. In terms of their productivity, I was surprised. 90% of people that said they really wanted to come back to the office, it was because of the friendships with people they have there. It was the experience. Yes. It's the connection with their coworkers. That was. I was surprised at what a big deal that was to people, and how that came through in the survey.
Well, why I'm not surprised about that, Steve, because I think. We've actually heard or seen a little bit of this where home sometimes being forced to be home is one thing than rather wanting to be home, because everybody's circumstances, there could be, family issues or other circumstances, right? And for a lot of people, work is more than just what brings them the paycheck. Right. Mm-hmm. Work is that, valuable relationships. That's where some lifetime friendships are formed. People there because you spend so much time there. So I'm not surprised that a lot of people would want to come back to work because they have, that connection there, and it may be a safe place to let out, and, to say things that they're dealing, because people come to work and share experiences that they're dealing with at home. They get some advice, they go back home and, they deal with it, right?
Absolutely.
So that's great. I mean, obviously it speaks to the environment that you have at Badger, that 90% of the people want to come back because of their relationships with their team members. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we've invested a lot in the culture, and I think that's played out over the years. People will enjoy being here, and it's because we take care of people, and I think that's it's important. I think it shows up, and I think that people tend to be short-sighted with their employees. They tend to underinvest in creating an environment that people want to work at for a decade. In the modern world and the way people kind of think about jobs, it's very transactional. People turn over all the time, but people really aren't great at their job until they've been with you for at least a year. I mean, half the time it's 2 years before they're truly great. And someone that's been with you for 4 years or 5 years, they can get done more in half the amount of time as someone who's been there for 3 months, right? So there's so much value unlocked by creating an environment that people want to work in for the long term. And I've kind of always had that philosophy. And I think that might have been my first job out of after I got my MBA was with IBM. And I think I probably picked that ethos up for them. You know, so many people work at IBM for like, you know, their entire career. You know, for 30 years they've been at IBM, and you know, I've tried to recreate that by managing the business in such a way that people are really happy and want to stay around. And I think that it's been good for the business. I mean, sometimes it has short-term costs to create an environment like that.
Yes.
But in the long term, I think it really does pay back to the company.
And that's where so many companies literally fail. And it's the reason, again, I had this panel discussion a week ago with industry experts, automotive industry experts, talking about, you know, how to improve automotive dealership culture, because in the auto space, it is largely transactional. Okay, no one can deny that. It is largely transactional. It's a month-to-month business. You live and die by your month end and your year end. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm you know, I've been in it long enough, almost 3 decades, to see that whether an employee has been there for 8-9 years, and I've seen this, and they either resign or move on to a better opportunity, as long as somebody else comes back and fits that spot, whether it be 1 or 2 people, and still produce the numbers, it's not a big deal, right? It's not a big deal. And that's where, like you're saying, you know, it takes a while to build the full productivity of an employee. And when you have 90% of your team wanting to come back to work, regardless of the circumstances, that says a lot for culture and the things that they will do to thrive, to make your company thrive in a difficult time. So that's awesome, and congrats to you for developing and investing in that culture. So one of the last questions, Steve, is how do your relationships with your customers change in this time? So we've talked about the relationship with the teams, your team members. So what about the relationship with the clients?
Sure. You know, I think it's harder to build relationships right now over the phone or in Zoom than it is in person. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, empathy is huge. Everyone's talking about empathy right now, and that's, you know, fairly obvious. I think, you know, the good news is we all have one more thing in common in the world, right? We're all vulnerable in a similar way, or, you know, we're all kind of in this together. But it is a really hard time for relationship building. I think, you know, if you're not face to face, if you're doing things over Zoom and over the phone, you may get less trust from your customers. You'll have less customer loyalty. They don't feel as connected to you if you haven't taken out to a beer or bought them a steak, right? So, you know, you may notice sales cycles becoming longer because of that lack of trust, that lack of transparency that you would get. We've all got to work against that right now and still keep setting things up. How can you do that? I think leveraging your sponsor is more important now than ever. You need someone inside these organizations to be your eyes and ears, because, and you always needed this to be successful, right? But especially if you have complex sales cycles and you're selling a complex product, but you really need this now more than ever. You know, your sponsor is rarely the only decision maker, the only person involved in a decision, especially with how tight purse strings are right now. I feel like there's more decision makers on everything. So you have to work with your sponsor and kind of connect with them, and before a meeting, try to uncover what are going to be the objections from the other decision makers and influencers involved in this sales cycle or in this decision process for you guys. And in that way, if you find out that information from them, you can address them. You've got to subtly prepare your sponsor on a pre-meeting call to bring up those key questions or make those key points to facilitate a discussion. That relationship with your sponsor is so much more important right now, because you're pitching remotely. You can't read the room. You can't get all the information that you'd be able to in a face-to-face situation. And some of the stuff you a great salesperson is doing a lot of this stuff and they don't even realize they're doing it, right? But then you put them in a Zoom meeting and they're like, why is this so hard? And it's like, well, your last 15 years of experience have taught you these 10 skills and you're employing all of them almost subconsciously. Now you can't read their body language. You can't, you lose that natural chit chat and rapport building. You don't get the relationship in place with each decision maker that you can in person, right? You need your sponsor to do that. They have these relationships in place. They have this clout, and your sponsor needs to follow up for you with all these decision makers and influencers and herd the cats for you and get genuine feedback, uncover objections, and then work with you to move the deal forward towards closure.
So I think of the 6 or 7 questions we touched on tonight, there are 2 that resonate big time. And one was the second to last on communication and putting your teams. I mean, there's so many things I took away from that one. Putting your team's fears to rest. Talking about the base pyramid of needs, making sure that they can still enjoy life, clarity and truthfulness. Having plans, immediate, medium, long-term plans, daily huddles for updates. And relationships, we touched on that, relationships with team members, both inter-team members, relationship with management. And
we've covered a lot in the last hour, haven't we?
We have covered a lot. Okay. And you probably think I wasn't listening, but here I'm taking notes like crazy. I'm like, damn. My fingers are going down here. Open my computer isn't making any noise. But This has been an hour, but there's one thing that we touched on a couple of weeks ago when we talked about in episode 69 and 70, I think it's going to be. We were talking about how management can, manage teams now, and they're at the end. I remember I wish I was recording this question at the time where we touched on interdepartmental responsibilities, functions, where within certain companies, like you have a great culture, as you described, where your teams gel, your various departments, obviously they're independent, they specialize in a specific area, so they do that very well, versus in a lot of companies where sales reps or account reps are managing multiple different responsibilities. So they're managing chat leads and e-leads that are coming in. They have to see clients or visit clients out in the field or on the floor. They're following up with deliveries. There's a whole level of multiple responsibilities that they have. And you were touching on why it was so important to have specialized reps in specialized functions for the greater good of the company.
Yeah, I do remember this. We stopped recording and then we started chit chatting. You were like, "Oh, I wish I had recorded that."
Yes, yes, I do.
So yeah, this is pertaining to the structure of the sales team, and
yes,
I'll tell you, I'm not the expert on this. The guy who wrote the book on this is Aaron Ross. He was a sales leader in the early days at Salesforce, and he wrote a book. It's called Predictable Revenue. And he, I had him on my podcast a few months ago, and he gave a nice summary of what that was all about. But I'll give you the 2-minute version.
Yes.
But basically, and the reason this came up is it's important right now because it's all about how you're structuring your sales team, right? And now's a great time to rethink the structure of your sales team because the sand has shifted beneath our feet, and now we're maybe the way we were doing things 5 months ago, maybe the sales team isn't optimized for today. So if you kind of think of, and a lot of companies don't do this, they just have one type of sales rep. It's called sales rep, and they
do everything.
They do everything. They like you were saying, they generate the leads, they close the deal, they manage the customers that are already customers, they manage their upsells, they manage their experience, etc. And this is something I think that we've done in software that a lot of other industries haven't done as much. We generally break a sales team up into three pieces. One we call SDR. So an SDR is the person who generates leads for your AEs, and the AE is the second piece, account executive, and that's kind of like your classic sales rep. They take the lead that is qualified from the SDR and they work the lead to closure, right? So the sales cycle. Then the third group is, we call them CSAs, Customer Success Associates, or CSMs, Customer Success Managers, I've heard too. They manage existing customers, and their job is to get upsells, make sure the customer is successful so they don't quit coming back to you. But their job is to maintain that relationship, get referrals from happy customers. That all comes from that customer success rep. So three groups: lead gen, who's called SDR, closes the deal called AE, and manages your existing customers called CSA. And it's right now is a great opportunity to rethink first step one is to, if you have everyone managing everything, is to break off a few of them to manage your existing customers, because then you can actually manage the amount of time they're spending with your customers and make sure that it's the right balance. And a lot of companies they overmanage their existing customers to the detriment of generating new business. And so in general, if you had 10 people and you snap off 2 of them and have them manage all the existing customers, they can only do so much work. And by nature, the other 8 are now freed up to generate more business. But yeah, so in terms, on the other hand, on the lead side, that you have a better opportunity if you crack off the other direction, the SDRs. You have a better opportunity to generate more leads because you got your SDRs focused on just generating leads, and now's a great time to generate leads because people are actually picking up the phone. So if you make that SDR's job not to close business, but just to find new leads that you're passing, they will find more leads. And I guarantee this is a way to make your whole sales team more efficient, to specialize into these 3 areas, and at the very least specialize into 2 areas: the existing customers versus the prospecting to close reps. So
that's really so interesting because I know someone that just developed a whole online course about that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's something that we think of as common practice in the world of software, but the rest of the world hasn't caught on.
His name is Everold, Reid, by the way.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. Well, everyone should check that course out.
So the least performance blueprint, which I know it's over your head because I briefly showed it to you the other day, was it talks about how dealerships largely focus on who's coming through the door, the new traffic, new leads, new phone calls, new chat leads, new walk-ins, and many do not manage their existing database very well at all. So they may be getting, for every 1 or 2 clients they're getting through the front door, 2 or 3 are leaving through the back door. And so the least performance blueprint course is designed to literally solve that problem in multiple ways, but we won't even get into that right now. But it's just so interesting when you bring that up. I'm like, this is the problem I'm trying to solve in the automotive sales space, because everything is so transactionally driven, so month-end driven, and everybody's looking for who's coming through the front, who's calling. And even today, when the electronic leads are coming in, the sales reps sitting at their desk trying to get quotes out and proposals out, and a client walks into the showroom, they got to drop the quote and go take the client that's there and then leave the other one waiting. So there's a whole issue with this setup. It just doesn't work right. Yeah. And, so that's a subject for another day. And I'd love to invite you on my next webinar. Not the webinar, my next panel discussion as an outside automotive guy to give a different perspective in the automotive space. So,
yeah,
but folks,
be happy to do that.
Nice. So, any takeaways, Steve, on this episode? We've gone again a long time, and we're definitely going to split this up into for the audio side. So, any takeaways before we wrap this one up?
I think that if I could leave any people with a takeaway, it would be that tough economic times are tough, and I suspect that we're going to be in a challenging economic time for a little while. I suspect that what's going on in the world right now, and it's July of 2020. I suspect that we're going to trigger a recession that's pretty deep from all this, and we're going to have to fight our way out of it. And it's salespeople that lead the way in that fight. They're the shock troops here. So we've got to just put our noses to the grindstone here and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. It's going to be. I suspect that this is going to be a challenging time for more so in certain industries than others, but I think it's going to be a challenging time. Well, if I can be of any use, I'm happy to. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Just look up Steve Benson, Badger Maps. If you're in field sales, check out what Badger does. It's super useful. And I've got the podcast is Outside Sales Talk. If you're a field salesperson, I focus on the problems and challenges that field salespeople have, and how to overcome them, and how to be better at field sales.
And I just became a shock troop.
Shock troops, I love it.
That's my new title. Okay, and you're preaching to the choir here, and I love it because, again, in our business and in most businesses across that, where sales generates the revenue. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you like salespeople or you don't like salespeople. It doesn't matter if you're an inside sales rep, an outside sales rep, and you're over the phone. If there's no revenue coming in, you don't have a company. So
that's right.
Respect the shock troops. Well, folks, this has been episode 71 with Steve Benson. This has been great. Another in-depth discussion and this particular one was on action sales leaders can take in a recession. And stay tuned for these, as we will release these on all your favorite podcast apps coming up in the next couple of weeks. We always enjoy hearing from you. So if you have any suggestions, feedback, or have an interest in appearing on the Reid Method Insider Podcast, contact us at insider@thereidmethod.com and subscribe, download wherever you get your podcasts. We're now on Spotify as well, as of a couple of weeks ago. So iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, all of them. And we always have great guests like Mr. Benson here of Badger Maps, Tom Hopkins, Les Brown, many others. So remember, folks, always, especially for the rest of 2020, you have to be thoughtful. Be thoughtful, be intentional, and absolutely, please be safe.